This week, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration published a formal proposal to reclassify cannabis under federal law. This marks a historic move to shift cannabis from a Schedule I to a Schedule III controlled substance, indicating a recognition of its medical benefits and lower potential for abuse compared to other drugs in the same category. Appearing in the Federal Register, this proposal triggers a 60-day public comment period, inviting opinions from citizens and stakeholders until July 22nd. The Department of Justice will also consider requests for a public hearing before an administrative law judge up until June 20th. A review of early comments highlights an interesting trend. Over 70% of early comments mention descheduling instead of rescheduling. With over 5,000 comments in the first week, over 3,600 comments favored or mentioned descheduling. This change raises many questions about how the federal government will address the $38 billion state legal cannabis industry, which would still leave all of those businesses operating illegally with cannabis rescheduled. It would presumably require DEA licenses for both cannabis retailers and suppliers, and it would presumably require prescriptions for adult-use cannabis. Here are some thoughts from Anthony Minetti, a DEA-licensed cannabis pharmacist.
So I come at this as a passionate advocate for the profession, and also having experienced what I consider to be the decimation of independent pharmacy. I don't want to see that happen to what we've worked so hard to bring about at the national level with cannabis. Because the federal government is out of it, and the DEA isn't regulating it, so much innovation and so much creativity and so much independent ownership and vitality and vibrance comes in this industry. And you can't appreciate it because nobody in this industry has worked under the thumb of the federal government like I do on the pharmacy side. It is horrible. We have no leeway. We can do nothing other than what they allow us. And we have to impose very unpopular regulations on the public that are not of our choosing. Think about it. You're in a business where we're dependent on people getting prescriptions filled, yet so often we have to tell them no more often than yes. It's so counterproductive, but that's what happens when you fall under the thumb of the federal government. And what I'm so concerned about in seeing this move to, quote, reschedule, is nobody truly understands the nuance of exactly what that means. People are focused on things like the Safe Banking Act, and wow, it's less taboo, or it's less criminalized as a Schedule III than a Schedule I. That is not true, and not because that's my opinion, because that's the facts. Everything that I've posted, some people have come off as thinking that it's me not being pro-cannabis or me not being for cannabis being more mainstream. That couldn't be further from the truth. Once we make this step and cross this Rubicon where it becomes reclassified, it's over. The federal government will have in one action, one sign of the pen, taken over the entire industry and subjugated every single participant in the industry to their regulation. That's what happens when something is classified. There's a law called the Controlled Substances Act of 1970. Before that, there was no, quote, controlled substances. Doctor wrote a prescription, you filled it. That was it. There was no oversight. There was no stigma. There was no anything. Cannabis was being dispensed out at Bell Pharmacy in the 1930s before the federal government prohibited it altogether. So when the Controlled Substances Act came into being, that was where a federal bureaucracy now exercised full authority over prescribers' ability to prescribe, dispensers, as in pharmacists' ability to dispense. They make the rules, we follow them. That's it. The reason that you have that is because to handle any of these substances through Schedule II through Schedule V, cocaine, believe it or not, is a Schedule II prescription drug. It's not a Schedule I like many think. Xanax, by comparison, is Schedule IV. Where they are proposing to put cannabis would put it with Suboxone, ketamine, anabolic steroids, And all those regulations that apply to those drugs, and I know what they are because I've dispensed all of these medications, would now apply to cannabis. First and foremost, for any person in the industry, be it manufacturing, cultivation, dispensary owners, you must obtain a DEA registration and license. And by the way, if you have any sort of drug conviction, you're automatically excluded from getting a DEA license. Now, how many of us in the cannabis space, especially what we've tried to promote in so many of the legacy, those in the legacy market, we've tried to bring into the quote legitimate market or have them as participants, they'll never be licensed by the DEA. If you've had any sort of felony, you will not get a DEA license. You have to apply for it. It's not something you apply for and get. You apply for and are screened. You're fingerprinted. You go through an FBI background check. And you have that DEA license, and once you have that license and you accept it, yes, you can have commerce within the controlled substances area, meaning you can accept the delivery of controlled substances from a supplier who also is DEA registered and licensed. Otherwise, you can't get the product. If you get the product, it's a felony. The penalties for possessing a class 3 controlled substance without a prescription are severe, far more severe than what cannabis is right now. And there is no decriminalizing it at the state level. Once there's a federal schedule in place, a state can't go in and say, oh, okay, well, the federal government, well, yeah, you made it Schedule 3, but we're not going to recognize that. No, that's not the way it goes. And not because the federal government can choose to look the other way like they do with the Schedule 1, the Schedule 1 classification now. It's because suppliers will be violating the conditions of their DEA license if you don't have a DEA license. The suppliers will be the enforcers of the regulation on the distribution. So the government's not going to enforce. The supply chain is going to enforce that.
We will continue to follow this story, and over the next few weeks, we will interview many of the stakeholders and find out why so many people are wary of rescheduling creating more problems than it solves. If you want to post your comments to the federal website, you can go to bit.ly/60day comment.